your spiritual doppelganger, you, and your divine self. When every soul on this sentient earth was created, and the format of that particular spirit expressing itself as a soul and body was sparked, there was you, the one. Then there is your spiritual doppelganger. Every one of us have a spiritual doppelganger. Your and my spiritual doppelganger are the ones that act as a liaison between the spirit realm and the earth realm. It sits by you at all times when you're having sex, when you're crying, when you're enjoying that favorite food of yours, when you're gossiping, when you're digging into your butt and sniffing it and wondering if someone just saw you, but you had that feeling deep down that someone in fact did, but you nevertheless relied on your five senses and concluded that no one did. That spiritual doppelganger is there with you when you took what was not yours. It was there with you when you assisted someone in need and cared not much for recognition or credit for doing something good, because deep down, you know it will pay off. Intrinsically, you know there is an influence there, continuously observant, watching very closely. This spiritual doppelganger is the same as the shadow that follows the body. But in this instance, to put it more accurately, since the physical lags behind the spiritual, it is not really a shadow, but more so a perfect, true, and exact copy of your spiritual essence before derivatives, such as your body, was created. This spiritual doppelganger we're speaking of here was the true archetype of what you are now. What you were 10 years ago and what you will be up till the last moment you take that last breath in this physical body. That spiritual doppelganger we're referring to is the copy, an original version of you. Its strings spiritually is attached to the body you are using now, the body to which has an expiration period. The spiritual doppelganger we are speaking of here is gently observant, listening, and ready to take any of your desires and petition to higher realms to open a case for request that says, hey, Mary has now reached that particular age on her book of destiny and now naturally has begun to desire to have a stable place of abode, or fill in the blank of whatever the man or woman desires. Therefore, I, the direct copy of what I have attached myself to in that physical body, would like to speak on behalf of the expression of myself in the physical body. In this case, as to why she deserves it, and I am prepared to take it to Earth Realm for her to enjoy it. Such is the nature of activity, partly, that this version of you, this spiritual doppelganger, so to say, does. The spiritual doppelganger is also the one who comes back to the material world, carrying the load of granted petitions from the immaterial realm, which the material follows, and brings it to you so that gradually, gently, and in rare cases, what may seem miraculous. That which you desire comes forth on a larger totality of contract you have signed far before coming to this material world. That spiritual doppelganger knows what certain time, certain contract triggers. And it is the one bringing in certain conditions that have been met or haven't been met and speaks on your behalf, you here, to say, okay, we know we signed this contract to do certain things, but here are the journeys that we went through in the body and that we've met. Therefore, still give us this thing that we say we should have if we've performed something. Very much like an if-then circumstance. This spiritual doppelganger is the one continuously bargaining on your behalf, speaking on your behalf as a liaison to assist you. Why? Because this original version of you that signed that contract as to what you would do on this material plane split itself for the purpose of material expression. You, the body you see in the mirror daily, are a copy of that real thing we are referring to here as spiritual doppelganger. So now you see two entities have been presented. This copy of you is what we identify as these Ikin Ifa, to which 256 potential algorithms are publicly available. You, the one listening to this as we speak, may have the archetypical essence of Iworimiji or Idiobara or Ejugbe, and so on and so forth. In this part of the world, most are often introduced to Ifa in form of divination of asking either a question, which can provide an answer of yes or no, or asking questions that entail caveats, or in some cases that caveat rises to the level of warning, and usually revelation of the highest possible outcome based on the essence of the one performing the Ifa divination is provided. That is to say, most are familiar with Odu Ifa when they do Ifa divination and an Odu comes up and the Babalawo begins to explain the summary as applicable to the one doing the consulting. This, quite often, is what many may be familiar with at North America as far as Ifa goes. But that is just one utility of these Odu Ifa. Another utility of these Odu Ifa is to know which of the 256 is your own archetype spirit, your own substantive doppelganger, your blueprint to which the material experiences follows. Remember, energy goes where attention is, and attention is nothing but an experience. The moment you begin to realize that there's an equivalence to where this physical sequence of what you've been experiencing, people you've met, the sequence of how certain things you've seen, heard, felt, occurred, just by others being in the same circumstance, you will start to realize it is all but energy. And energy is a law. And those energetic laws are codified in this things called Odu Ifa. And the codification of your energy, which is substantive law, is necessary for you to comprehend in order to navigate life relatively easier. Each of the 256 Odu Ifa are no different than a sentient being staring straight at you each time they pop up in a divination. So when we are looking at these different Odus in the screen, that's one thing. It's very casual. It's no different than looking at an image of something. But if one or more of these sentients come up during a formal divination, it is no different than a visitor coming into a house. The instant you open the door with an expectation that someone is coming in. In this case, the door is your circumstance, and the expectation is the response from the Ifa divination. Hence, the sentient intelligence called Odu walks in the moment all the prerequisites are met for it to connect with you. Usually, one of these 256 initially comes in, and that one is followed by two more to determine whether they come in to reveal what may be good or otherwise. And usually other Odu follows them until the specific answer is reached based on the hierarchy of old and young. See, what I've just said will make more sense in the future with subsequent videos and explanation. In this Patreon post, I provided a brief explanation of the basics of Odu Ifa. The order in which they are chronologically mentioned denotes which is the oldest to the young. Although, as a brief notice here, this order of old to young was not always the case. I repeat, this hierarchy of old and young is strictly in terms of how we acknowledge them in the material realm, because to each of their own, these Odus are masters and emperors of their own respective domains. So do not go assuming that because a Jugbe is the first and considered the greatest Odu Ifa, that it is all that there is to chase after and nothing more. In fact, a Jugbe was once the youngest of all the Odus, and in many cases still is. But when they were all on their way to Earth, he came from the back of the line, paid his way through, and rushed ahead as he was not too interested in waiting and being delayed. Therefore, we classify a Jogbe in the mature world as the oldest, since he was the first one to appear in what we perceive as the material world. Similar connotations can be seen in other theological texts where it states something along the line that First shall be the last, and the last shall be the first. Sure, there are more allegorical meaning to that, but let us not steer too far here. And in other Odu Ifa references, you would hear it illustrated slightly differently that Onwani was the one that instructed Ojugbe to go ahead and inspect what the humans on Earth were doing. But upon arrival, rather than Ojugbe rushing by himself and paying. But nonetheless, the common denominator is that Ojugbe upon arrival was stopped from returning to his fellow Odu to report what he's seen on Earth, because the inhabitant of Earth were too excited and quickly crowned Ojugbe as king, whereas Ofumeji was the oldest and Ojugbe the youngest. Nevertheless, of the 256 Odu Ifa, one of them is the one that is your spiritual doppelganger that moves to and from the corporeal to the incorporeal to send, receive, deliver, transfer spiritual messages from this material thing that you observe with your five senses to other realms, or from other realms to this material world. To reiterate, there is you that you see in the mirror and accept as your identity, the you on the material, which is a mere copy, a mere representation. Then there is the presentation of you, embodied and expressed in one of these 256 publicly available Odu Ifa that speaks on your behalf in the spirit realm. The carrier of the load of your desires, spiritual petitions to the incorporeal, where the Ashe self resides, in order to resonate in the physical. That if any good or bad was coming, it receives the hit first, and its copy, you, in the material, subsequently expresses a ricochet effect. In this material world, and the conditions in one's life simply reflects what the true you, that spiritual doppelganger, is experiencing spiritually. Within each Odu Ifa seats stories, allegory, proverbs, panegyrics, incantation, history, politics, man-made and spiritual law, arts and science, and many more keys to life. All of those attributes are played out by main and minor characters. Quite often, the main characters are the Orisha that many are readily aware of. Quite often also, these Orisha will bear names that most are not publicly aware of. Depending on the compilation of which Orisha is spoken of the most in a given Odu Ifa, that specific Orisha will be determined to be the main Orisha that is said to govern that particular Odu. For instance, it could be said that Iworimeji, as I've learned from one of my mentors, is ruled by Olode Abaluaye. But that does not necessarily mean that if Iworimeji comes up in Igbodu, that it, Abaluaye, will strictly be your Orisha. Something called Ibo is how the Orisha is figured out. Ibo is the furtherance beyond the initial Odu that comes out based on questions to figure out the particular Orisha. There's a method to that also, which is where you see the use of pieces of items utilized along with Okwele and Ikin Ifa. Anyway, so that is just one example, but this does not solely determine which Orisha is your spirit akin to, if you were to figure out which Odu is equivalent to your own spiritual doppelganger. That's very important to know. If you are clear at this point, you will know that there is you here in the corporeal as a carbon copy. Then there is the version of that carbon copy in the incorporeal realm, which is figured out via which particular Odu is your archetype, because the 256 publicly available Odus are the archetype of spirit types in humans, albeit they are accompanied by other spirit formats that are known as Orisha. So, there is you here in the material, that is one. Then there is you there in the immaterial, and by the way, when I say there in the immaterial, know that it exists simultaneously, future, past, and present, and is not limited to your side of there being something far or close. So there's you here in the material, that's one, and then there's you there in the immaterial, which is two. Then enters the Orisha, that the real version of you is the closest to spiritually, that is willing to quickly accompany and protect your spiritual self in the spiritual realm when it is going on journey, or protecting the real you spiritually occasionally, or that sent the carbon copy of you to come here to do certain tasks similar to that Orisha's path. That is the Orisha that most people love to affiliate themselves with by saying they are a child of Oshun, or a child of Oya, or a child of Ogun, and so on and so forth. Let me let you in a little bit of secret. See, those Orisha were types of spirits that once lived on this earth, but were not humans. And I'll explain what I mean by that. They were not necessarily humans, but had the ability to carry the image of humans. Eventually, humans learned certain arts from them, and the names of the ones that learned the spiritual arts from them are the ancestral spirits associated with those Orisha. For instance, Obatala uses the power of Oshanla. This is why you will quite often hear Obatala be mixed with the name Oshanla or Orisha. And under Oshanla are other entities that accompany the Great White Spirit, like Oshusi and many more. The same applies with Ogun. Ogun is a format of spirit that once existed on earth, but was not human. But some humans in the past learned certain arts from that spirit that goes far beyond the use of iron and things like that. And they venerated the power that the spirit taught that particular ancestor. And we affiliate that spiritual creature with the name Ogun based on the fact that one of our ancestors carried the namesake Ogun, which is a similitude to the power they use. Shango is another one. Jakuta is the spirit that Shango sits under and uses some of its power, so on and so forth. What most do not know is that when they go for Itefa after the Shefa, and they're told that Oya is your Orisha, that is a key that leads, or is supposed to lead them to the fact that most of the spiritual work and spiritual tools, up to the type of plants they will start to use, not just limited to your Ewa, which is don't eat this, don't drink this, don't do certain things. When you know your own Orisha, certain leaves and plants, whether they're masculine in nature or feminine in nature, whether they're used to heal or whether they're used to bind, whatever it is now automatically associated with you too. Now, it always has been that way. But the thing with consciousness observing itself is once you know about it now, you are further bound by it. So if you have any hardship, there are certain leaves you can just take shower with, extract the chlorophyll with alcohol or salt, mix it with certain things, or just by itself. And it will be as though you went and did some special spiritual work when all you just did was just lather yourself with some chlorophyll from a plant, because that's the plant consecrated to the spirit that works with the power that Oya uses. So you, her daughter, are communicating closer to it, and then that version of you, your spiritual doppelganger, relates to you closer and listens to you better, because that is the soul akin to that plant. Almost like pressing a buzzer button to alarm the you there busy with so many things that you can never fathom here. And you can use these plant intelligence as a form of buzzer to send messages to your true self for it to hear quicker. Again, what most do not know is that when they go for it, Tefa, and they're told, hey, Oya is your Orisha. And then usually in some cases, it's probably two more. And of course, Ori is one of the main Orishas, because there are many more allegories and actual story to let you know Ori itself is an Orisha. And Ori itself always wins anytime the other Orishas attempt to fight it. But that is for another day. Nonetheless, whenever you're told, hey, this is your particular Orisha, that is a key that leads you to the fact that most of the spiritual work and spiritual tools that you will learn or should learn or seek is under the house of Oya. And to now begin the journey of learning about the spirits that Oya used as the source of her power, which matches the soul wavelength of you, the one who was told that their Orisha was Oya. In so many words, when you're told this is your Orisha, It just means your soul wavelength matches that entity. And that is the reason why that Orisha looked at you in the spirit realm and say, look, I want you to go complete a certain mission here in a certain way. Or to say, look, I want you to go through this family, go through this experience, just so that you could bring something back. Or whatever it is that you're going, I'm going to support you in it because I have something to gain also. That is the basic 101 that anyone who goes for Itafa should know. There are 4 main houses in Yoruba culture as far as Orisha is concerned, and where spiritual powers are kept and to be learned. First is Ifa, then Ogun, then Jakuta, then Oshanla. See, these 4 main houses do not omit the significance of other Orisha like Oshun, Olode, and so on. But the 4 main umbrellas where most will take the path to learn more about the true functional spiritual arts and the spiritual powers involved are under those 4 houses. This is where you would see them say Ose Ogun, Ose Ifa, or more formally said it's Ose Awu, or they'll tell you Ose Jakuta, which is under where Shango is, or they'll tell you Ose Osha, which is where under Obatala is. But you hear Ose, Ose, Ose. That is where certain powers lie spiritually. Most of those basics are kept silent because within each of these houses are secrets of the origin of certain families within what people now call Yoruba in modern times. Keyword being what people now call it in modern times. Within these houses are entailed how the traditional government is structured. For the sake of not deviating too far, let us get back to where we were. So there is you in the material that is one, and version of you in the immaterial, which is known via which Odu is yours, that is 2. Then there's the Orisha, which align the best to accompany you in your journey based on past lives and family spiritual ties, that is 3. When people go into Ibudu, they then take with them a basic but useful tool of divination called Ikin Ifa that can be spoken to figure things out based on you and your journey in life. For instance, if you have a dream that seems confusing, ask it with Obi or Oweyo or Urubu based on the pact you've made with your own Ikin to determine what tool the Ikin will use to speak with you. So each of this divination tool are mirror mediums that your own divine head housed in that Ikin Ifa will use to communicate with you. All these should be introduced to you when you do your Itefa. If you are not taught these things, you are merely carrying a vehicle without knowing how to drive it. The main point of doing Itefa is to be able to speak with the Ikin Ifa because you now have a tool of divination attached to your divine version in the immaterial world to directly communicate with your own Uri. That Ikin Ifa you brought back from Igbodu is the house to which your immaterial original copy is going to be called upon and sit. No different than you when you go out and go to wherever you run your errands, school, work. At some point you will come back to a house. The equivalent for your Uri and the equivalent for your spiritual self are those things you're looking at that looks like ordinary seed, but they are not, because they've been consecrated to be the house for your Uri. This is the reason why you have to take very good care of it. You have to keep it in an environment that's suitable, that's well ventilated, smells well, looks well, is clean, because it is the abode for your Uri based on the Odu that comes out. You have been consecrated to it, whether you realize it or not. So say for instance, Ofun Uri gave birth to you and you found that out in Ibudu. You are Ofun Uri. Ofun Uri is your true spiritual name. And that physical Ikin Ifa that you're just casually staring at is no ordinary seed. It has been consecrated to call down your true spiritual version so that it can hear you and go on journeys for you. And that Uri of yours is already lies into your physical body in the spiritual world. Now it's escorted by another spirit that works under Ikin Ifa, that works under the arts of Ifa. That spirit is what guides your Ori to come back and listen to you and to go back to where it's going, to protect you from hexes and other things that are probably not so good. So when you go into Igbodu and you learn which Odu gave birth to you, you've gained one extra spiritual ally, which is Ifa itself. Quite often it is difficult to connect with the real version of you, and it takes a lot of spiritual continuous work, just like anything else. Even if you have the Ikin Ifa, you still require continuous work. But quite often it's relatively harder to connect to your spiritual self. But every now and then the intuition assists you, but intuition is so fluid that it can be convoluted with others' thoughts and others' feelings. But with Ikin Ifa, you've consecrated a house for your Ori to sit on as a direct access to, without any guess game. It's basically a program of its own. So think of it like a transformer where you get that wire that connects from the main transformer into your house. It's the same thing. That's what that Ikin Ifa is. So if you had a dream, you can ask your true self, in this instance, Ofunwori, whether it is a good dream or a bad dream. Whether you need to go to a third party to do Ifadida, or if there's something you can do here yourself and send your version, Ofunwori, to go fix it, and simply giving maybe something like giving out monies to someone in need through the prayers you have done in front of the Ikin is sufficient to remove any negativity from the dream, or any influence that might not be so good from the dream, just as an instance, or whatever else, so on and so forth. There's so much that can be done. Your material form is 1, your immaterial substantive self is 2, your Orisha is 3, your Ikin Ifa, which is the house for your substantive self to rain down on and hear you, is 4. Then there are a few more, which is part of what is held by the Oluwo, which is the one that does the Itefa for you. This is a conversation you should have with that Oluwo. And the other beyond the first aforementioned 4 is Ishu and Itifa. Ishu is the main partner in arms with anyone utilizing Ikin Ifa as a tool. And you usually hear stories about how close Orunmila is with Ishu, no matter what. Starting from the point where Orunmila went and brought the powers of Ikin Ifa from heaven, allegories and whatnot. But nonetheless, if you listen to it closely, you will see the relationship. And all the way to when Orunmila was having some type of feud amongst all the other Orisha. Ishu was the main one that assisted him throughout that entire journey. So that Orunmila, aka any Babalawo, and the arts entailed in it, and the knowledge and wisdom in it, Ishu was the one that assisted him. Ishu was also the one who assisted Orunmila to bring Oduduwa and make him the king. There's a lot of story to that entails the structure of politics and all that stuff in that culture. But there is more to learn about it when it comes to the tool that you have in your hand. Remember, Ishu is just a name, a label. There's a function to it also, which I would like to emphasize you focus on rather than just a name. So other tools required that's important for you to know about is Ishu and Itifa. And the Itifa is what allows your Ikin Ifa to basically hear you quicker and swifter. Usually speaking, Ifa works very, very, very gradual, very slow. Every now and then it would work quick, but for the most part, Ifa takes its time. The conglomerate of spirit that works with Ifa moves very casual because they work with the substantive version of things. They go to the core and slowly fine tune it. That Itifa is what assists it move a little bit faster. But usually, if you venerate your head while in front of the spiritual house called Ikin Ifa built for it, it will usually hear you and go do some work nonetheless. So you see now that Ikin Ifa itself is not necessarily the Orisha, but it is the house used to call upon your Ori, your true spiritual self, and your spiritual doppelganger, which has a true name based on the Odu that came up in Igbodu. And the ancestral spirit that granted us the ability to use such spiritual art is Orunmila, who will always be venerated and called on to support you each time you begin to blow water and alcohol on those Ikin Ifa, or if you're a female, sprinkle water and alcohol on it. There were entities that worked with these Orisha and taught them things. And that power is what we, their children, have available to learn about with an open heart, a pure heart, a clean heart, and must always give credit to those who preserve those arts, aka the ancestral spirits, aka our progenitors, such as Orunmila, Obatala, Oshun, Ogun, Oya, Shango, Lokun, Yemoja, and so on. The credit must always be given where it is due, because those ancestral spirits to themselves can also play a role in preventing or allowing the power of accessing those other spirits from working or not. Because these ancestral spirits, our progenitors, are the ones who learned the power that we're using now through them. They were the ones who learned it from these other spiritual entities. We're merely lending the power that they've learned from other entities. And I want that to be very clear. So if you're lending the power that someone else has learned from other entities, you still have to give them the credit and honor for that power to awaken in you or to be of use to you. This is another thing many people don't realize when they go into Isheshe, and they wonder why it's just not working. And most people affiliate with them in Isheshe do not tell them these basics. This is the reason why in Isheshe they would always tell you Ijuba is important. It's one of the first things you do. You venerate and honor those who came before you, because without them, you wouldn't be here. And what you're trying to evoke as power to utilize to connect to spiritual realm was what something they left you. You're merely lending it. So give honors. Very important. It's not for the purpose of ego, even though one can say some of, spirits can be egotistical sometimes. And if you get into it deep enough, you get to a point where they want you to know that they want something from you in a certain way. And if you don't do it that way, you're as good as fucking off. They'll just tell you fuck off. But ego is one way to look at it, but there's more to it, because the message that the spirit realm received is very different from the way we communicate. So ego also is not necessarily the appropriate way to interpret the art of Vijuba or the veneration of those that came before us. It's just basic honors that's required. It's like sticking a key in a door. Now, once you've stuck the key in the door, twisting it is another thing. And pulling or pushing it, or knowing whether you'll pull or push it, is another thing. But Ijuba is just the first stage of just, whipping out the key and sticking it in. You gotta start somewhere. This is why when the power of Oya is called upon, for instance, you venerate her. Same with Oshun and all the other Orisha. So Orunmila, for instance, is the ancestral spirit that preserved and passed in the art of how to use Ikin Ifa as a tool to touch and call upon one's true self, and also to use it as a tool of divination. Of course, there's several tools of divination, such as Urugbo, which are shown on the patron post, which I'll be adding this and that patron post to the course for those taking the course. And divination of Ifa also can be used through Obi or cowries, which is Oweyo, or in some case Owero. And of course, there's male-female equivalent to Obi. And cowries. And for Obi, sometimes you see 3 lines in it. And that 3 lines, you don't use those 3 lines. When you partition it, you don't use it for divination. And sometimes you can even consume it with some alligator pepper to assist with boost of memory, etc. But it's only the 1 or 2 lines used for divination, just for those who may not know. So besides Orunmila, there are other spirits that are true landlords and owners of the essence of divination in the spiritual realm, but without the lessons and path already carved for us by Orunmila. How would you or I know how to use the tools of divination beyond hobby? The mere act of venerating an ancestral spirit who once suffered and tried very hard to leave for the future generations any specific given art is sufficient for that to open the door to other opportunities, where you hear stories of people telling you that certain spirits come to them and dream to guide them, and so on and so forth. It's no different than a father who was a master sculptor and his child was given a tool of chisel, mallet, and saw, but the child knows not how to use it. The closer the child is to the father, the better he or she learn to use those tools. And in this case, since it's a spiritual one in nature, the law of time used to measure physical relationship with space are insignificant. They're insignificant factors because these ancestral spirits, which were far closer in spiritual pact with the other spirits that granted and taught them certain powers and knowledge, these ancestral spirits can come in at any time and grab you by the hand and say, "Here, my child, let me show you and introduce you to the spirits and learn from," regardless of whether it's art of war, art of divination, or whatever it is. Nevertheless, know that power is what you seek when you go into Ishashi. And these ancient powers were mastered by those ancestral spirits we loosely refer to as Orisha. And the powers used by these Orisha has other spirits which rules over the domain, function, and concept of the principle behind those powers. It's important for you to realize these two delineations. In order to reach these principles behind the function, one must give credit where it is due. This is why the ancestral spirits called Orisha are the path to the power behind what their names are known for. For even they learned those powers from other spirits at some point. It is no different than attempting to speak to someone in a building who is, say, the manager, but you won't be allowed in unless a close friend of that head or that manager of that building grabs you by the hand and takes you in. So when they tell you Oya has power over fire winds, know that that fire wind has an entity or a conglomerate of entities that work with it and uses it, or a spiritual creature beyond comprehension in the material realm that taught and granted Oya that power that you, her child, in today's world can have access to. When you are told that Orunmila is quote-unquote God of divination, according to Western interpretation, some spirit taught him that art once upon a time, and he sought out the counsel of these spirits in the time of need. What is more wild once you begin to dig deeper into Isheshe is that most of these ancestral spirits we refer to were not all 100% men. There were half other creatures and half men. And some of them were completely different types of creatures that were not humans at all, as we know them today. But some of them made it with the children of men. This is where in Isheshe, if you pay close attention, you will notice each location within that part of the world has a specific crown for specific Orisha. These Orisha were those who had spiritual pact with each location, with these creatures in the pact. And the children of men who were closest to them were the ones granted certain spiritual abilities that sits on that crown and other things used by the designated king. So there's a crown for Ishu, crown for Orunmila, crown for Oya, crown for Oshun, so on and so forth. Children of men in the past had closer relationship to other beings that we now know today loosely. And certain tools left by those closer to those creatures are passed on through culture and rite of passages to those open to learning, willing to be patient, and willing to have a pure heart. With each of these entities that we refer to as Orisha are different paths that the spiritual arts that exist can be used, and the answer is often closer to us than we think via plants and animal intelligence. This is why the use of plants is never too far-fetched and very common in Isheshi, because there are certain spirits that have domain over each plant and can be called upon depending on the path one is taken by the intelligence in the chemical structure of those plants. And some more, such as what you may consider useless items like broken glass, used chairs, torn pieces of shoe, or a garbage disposal site. All things, all material things have spiritual equivalents. If you, the physical body, have a spiritual equivalence, know that anything else that you lay eyes on in any sequence, in any order, in any format also has spiritual equivalence that is of use and can be accessed at any point. This is why certain plants and certain seeds are used as tools for certain things. This is why certain plants are used as tools to consecrate, to call upon certain Orisha. Those are the basics you must know that rarely will be revealed to you, a step at a time. But before we end this, know that all of what I have just summarized to you had to also be learned by me over several years. And I'm still learning, I'm continuously growing. And surely, there are always those who know far more than I do. Either way, those going to Isheshe who merely carry physical paraphernalia and are enthralled by the allegories and stories and concept of ancestors must know these basics, because there are pragmatic means. There are far more than the appearance and theme that seem attractive to people. I implore you to seek the function of it, because if truly you have anything you are doing with that thing people find interesting, then you should seriously educate yourself beyond being someone else's slave and cash cow. Wield yourself with competence to use the tools available to you. Not everyone who poses to be in the Isheshe has your best interest in heart. The worst thing anyone can do to you or with you spiritually is to leave competence absent in the realm of your journey in Isheshe. The worst thing that can be done to anyone in life is to spiritually enslave them. That is the worst type of slavery, and it begins with incompetence. As for those on Patreon page, I'll upload a cheat sheet of how to do a basic divination using Obi or calories on the Patreon page. This is a video originally part of the one-on-one course, but when it comes to subject matters like this, none of us can travel alone, and the ratio of those in the course is relative to those publicly here on YouTube, whereas many people need to benefit from this. So if you're not a Patreon member and need a copy of the basic divination cheat sheet, just email me and it'll be sent to you. Stay competent. Hey, I'm inviting you to come join the Patreon page. Not only do you get access to documents, posts, and videos that you will never find on any other platforms, you also get instant access to webinars that otherwise will cost far more. And we speak of things that usually we would not be able to speak of on any other platforms far more freely. On top of that, you get the opportunity to send me monthly questions along with everyone else's questions, so you can see other people going through similar circumstances. You never know, what you think might be a stupid question is quite often very valid. On top of that, you get access to monthly question and answer archives from several years back from people who have gone through it and people who are going through it. Get information regarding things you experience daily that you didn't even know you could take advantage of when it comes to business, work, or other personal things. There's a community of people where you can bounce information off of, and they can give you some tips and tricks based on what they're currently going through in their respective venues that you might maybe want to link up with. And there's a high likelihood you're not going to find them anywhere else. And you also get the access to directly send me messages. Oh, and also if you are a tier 4 member, you get access to yet another monthly meeting where we actually answer as much questions as we can, and we're between an hour and a half, and in some cases up to 4 hours. In addition to that, we also show some exclusive lessons that are not going to be posted on Patreon or anywhere else but the tier 4 meeting alone. So come forth, come join the 500 plus people already on Patreon. And in some cases, we even give certain things out. And while you're at it, you might want to check out the store, subtlesubstanceservices.com. There might be a few things you want to pick up in there.